In coordination with the Arizona Department of Education, our office has issued revised school district expenditure budget forms for fiscal year 2020. In today's video, we will briefly discuss the minor changes that were made as a result of the most recent legislative session and to allow ADE to collect needed information. The biggest change that occurred is that the budget forms and the associated worksheets were combined into one file. The majority of this video will discuss how the new parts of the file will work and offer suggestions on how districts can reconcile their budgeted amounts to those reported on the APOR 55-1 report. To start, let's review the summary of significant changes that was issued along with the new forms. All applicable amounts for the base level, transportation support level, classroom site fund allocation, qualifying tax rate, and Arizona State Retirement System contribution rates in the forms and instructions have been updated for fiscal year 2020. In the submission and publication instructions, we revised instructions for linking to the district's budget posted on ADE's website to remind districts that ADE's proposed budget application was discontinued in fiscal year 2019. All districts need to ensure they remove any existing links to the old proposed budget application site. Districts should refer to the step-by-step instructions for posting a link to the correct location on ADE's website. On the cover in summary page 1, we added lines below the existing average teacher salary table and comment box to calculate the average teacher salary percentage increase from fiscal year 2018. On page 2 in summary page 2, we added space to report purchase services personnel FTE separately from traditional district employees FTE. On page 6, we updated the name of Fund 071 to the English Language Learner Fund from the Structured English Immersion Fund. And finally, we combined the expenditure budget forms and worksheet calculations into one file, the 2020 expenditure budget file. Worksheets A through S were reformatted into 3 tabs: the Data Entry tab, a Calculations tab, and an APOR 55 tab. We will spend the rest of this video describing how those 3 tabs should be used. Our main goal in converting the worksheets into the 3 tabs was to make it easier for district staff to reconcile the budget calculations to the APOR 55-1 report, to identify the need for revisions and ensure the accuracy of revision amounts. We also wanted to create one place where districts can enter all amounts related to their budget calculations. This should reduce the time needed to complete the data entry portion of the budget. The functionality added through some additional automation in the calculations should also reduce the number of errors made when completing the forms. Your first step in completing the budget form is to fill in the district's information at the top of the cover page. This information will automatically pull through to all of the other tabs in the file. This seems like a simple step and you might think you can skip it and fill it in later, but it is very important that the 9-digit CTD number is entered properly and correct version of the budget is selected from the pull-down menu, indicated by the red ovals shown here on the page. Formulas in the Calculation and APOR 55 tabs rely on these fields to make calculations that depend on the type of district or version of the budget being submitted. If these fields are not completed properly, there may be errors in the amounts generated by the budget form. The next step is to complete the Data Entry tab. Before you start to enter your district's data, check to verify that the CTD number and budget version properly pulled to the tab. The red box shown at the top of the slide shows where this information is located. We have included a box at the top of the data entry page, shaded in yellow, to display legislatively determined amounts for the fiscal year. The amounts shown on this slide are for fiscal year 2020. Districts should start their data entry with the unweighted student counts for the indicated years. If you completed a budget form in the past, the student count box should look familiar to you. In this video, we are using the red letters on the slide to indicate the corresponding area of the old worksheets. For example, line 1 here had previously been included on worksheet H, as it is used to determine ADM growth for the prior year in the calculation of district additional assistance. Since the growth calculation is determined based on total prior year ADM, only the total should be entered on line 1. Districts should enter their prior year 100th day ADM amounts on line 2 and estimate their current year ADM amounts on lines 3 through 5. The next section of the Data Entry tab is used to report the student counts used in calculating the Group B weights. We included ledger-style shading throughout the Data Entry tab to help users enter amounts on the correct line. In addition, we modified the order of the specific areas to agree to the way they are presented on the APOR 55-1. This should make reconciling student counts between the budget and APOR easier. The next section here includes some of the information needed for the new automation of certain calculations. The checkboxes on lines 1 through 3 should be used only if the particular situation applies to the district, so the appropriate calculations can be done automatically. As the correct boxes are checked on lines 2 and 3, the amount shown on line 4 for adjusted base level amount will change. Districts should report their teacher experience index on line 5. On lines 6 and 7, report amounts for audit expenditures made for the fiscal year 2 years prior to the budget year. Entries for transportation funding are made in the next section. These amounts, along with data collected from the prior year and the district CTD number that was entered on the cover, are used to calculate the transportation support level and transportation revenue control limit on page 4 of the APOR 55 tab. Now let's pause on examining the Data Entry tab and look at the APOR 55 tab. The APOR 55 tab shows a mock-up of the district's APOR 55-1 report. The amounts entered on the Data Entry page will automatically populate the fields on this page. After you complete the Data Entry tab, the APOR 55 tab will give you an indication of what your APOR 55-1 will look like before actual ADM is calculated. ADE calculates and issues APOR 55-1 reports for each district, and the reports will change throughout the year as ADM fluctuates in response to districts reporting membership for their students during the year. When comparing your APOR 55-1 report to your budgeted amounts, the easiest place to find differences is in the ADM amounts on the first 3 pages. Like the APOR 55-1 report, the APOR 55 tab is divided into 6 pages. Page 1 is shown on this slide. Page 1 displays information about non-AOI student counts as shown by the yellow highlight here on the slide, as well as Group A and Group B support level weights and add-ons. There are 3 major sections to the page. The top section shows the estimated current year ADM on the left and prior year 100th day ADM on the right. The middle section calculates the district's Group A weighted student count. Using the CTD number as well as the student counts entered on the data entry page and the isolated district checkbox, we have made the calculation of Group A support level weights automatic. The bottom section of the page calculates the Group B add-ons for non-AOI students. Pages 2 and 3 of the APOR 55 tab are very similar to page 1, just for full-time and part-time AOI student data. One item to note on the AOI pages is that the total prior year ADM is used, without AOI amounts being separately reported, so we grayed out that info here. ADE's APOR 55-1 report will show those amounts from the AZ system. Page 4 has a lot going on. We'll start in the top right corner of the page. The base support level section pulls together all of the weighted student counts and add-ons shown on pages 1 through 3 of the APOR 55 tab. AOI adjustments are made and multiplied by the adjusted base support level amount that is determined by the district's eligibility for the teacher compensation increase in 200 days of instruction. Next, in the top left corner, the extended base level amount that was calculated in the top right corner of the page will be multiplied by the district's teacher experience index. Just below the TEI calculation, base support level adjustments for audit service expense, tuition loss adjustments, and student revenue loss phase down are added to get the base support level base revenue control limit. Just below the BSL BRCL calculation is the calculation for the transportation support level, or TSL, and below that, the calculation for the transportation revenue control limit, or TRCL. We have also automated the selection of the proper state support level amounts used to calculate the TSL amount. The final sections to cover are the calculations of the district support level, or DSL, and revenue control limit, or RCL, in the right-hand column. The amount calculated for the RCL is pushed to line 1 of page 7 of the budget, just as it did in prior years. You may notice that there are lines that used to be included on worksheets F and O in the DSL and RCL calculations. We'll go back to the other information section of the data entry tab and get to those consolidation tuition amounts later in that tab. Lines 1 and 2 of the other information section are for those districts approved by the State Board of Education for a capital transportation adjustment, Pursuant to ARS 15-963, districts should enter those amounts for the appropriate grade level in line 1. For budget adoption, the APOR 55 tab will automatically calculate an estimated district additional assistance reduction, so line 2 should be left blank. After ADE calculates the actual DAA reduction for the fiscal year, it should be entered as a positive amount for the appropriate grade level in line 2. Again, line 2 should only be used for budget revisions. Any amount entered in line 2 will override the estimate. Line 3 is where transitional costs associated with the consolidation or unification with another district are entered and then pushed to the DSL and RCL calculations on page 4 of the APOR 55 tab. On lines 4 through 7, districts should enter the full assessed property valuations received from the county. In other words, the amount entered should not be divided by 100. That adjustment is made on the APOR 55 tab. This is a change from the method previously used to enter the valuations on Worksheet J. If you are having trouble reconciling to page 6 of the APOR 55-1, check to make sure that you entered the full valuation on the Data Entry tab. We will now move back to the APOR 55 tab to finish discussing pages 5 and 6. Page 5 of the APOR 55 tab calculates district additional assistance. There is one line that only applies to type 03 districts, elementary districts not within a high school district. We will come back to that when we discuss type 03 districts later in the video. Finally, page 6 of the APOR 55 tab shows the final calculation of equalization assistance. Next, we will briefly go over some of the items contained on the Calculations tab.
The information on the Calculations tab is meant for general district use. It provides detail on calculations not shown on the APOR 55 tab, but it also provides information for items that don't roll forward to the APOR 55 tab. The first item on the tab is the Group A weight support level table. We included it so that districts with a student count between 100 and 600 could see how their support level weights are calculated. The next section on the Calculations tab includes the K3 and K3 reading weighted amounts generated and also a line for additional tax in districts ineligible for state equalization assistance. Next, we have a copy of the table used to calculate the DAA per student count amounts. Again, we included it so that districts could see how their DAA amounts were calculated. And we'll now move back to the Data Entry tab to discuss the entries that don't relate to the APOR 55 tab. As we look back at the Data Entry tab, we can see that there's information you'll enter for the budget balance carry forward, as well as accommodation school districts providing some information that relates to their calculation of a carry forward. Those amounts don't feed forward to the APOR report, they feed forward to the Calculations tab. So when we look at the Calculations tab, we can see the calculations related to the budget balance carry forward for normal school districts or accommodation school districts. You'll also see here that several lines have pink highlighting on their line numbers, and those identify clickable links that can take you back to the relevant part of the Data Entry tab where you would enter this information. Back on the Data Entry sheet, the next section is related to districts that receive federal impact aid and any of the amounts that are needed to be filled in related to impact aid. Once those impact aid amounts are filled in on the Data Entry tab, the calculations on the Calculations tab will automatically appear and provide the information about what amount is available to be spent from the impact aid fund in the budget year. Back on the Data Entry tab, the next section is related to districts operating under the provisions of a small school adjustment who may have grown in a way that they no longer qualify for the full small school adjustment. If you check the box here, you'll need to fill in the information below as well. If you have questions about the fiscal year that the district first exceeded the small school adjustment ADM levels, you can contact the Department of Education. When a district checks that box on the Data Entry tab, the prior year student counts are pulled into either the section that calculates the small school adjustment phase-down limit shown here, or a very similar section that calculates the maximum override for a district no longer eligible for a small school adjustment. Depending on the year that you entered on line 18 on the Data Entry tab. The maximum override subject to an election is calculated on line 6 of either of those sections. On page 7, line 3, as part of your calculation of the GBL, districts that use this option should enter any amount less than or equal to the amount shown on line 6 of the applicable section. The next section of the Data Entry tab is for districts that lose tuition revenue due to a different district beginning to offer instruction in one or more high school grades not previously offered. They would complete the information in this section to calculate the adjustment for tuition loss. There are related calculations on the Calculations tab. However, this is a very rarely needed section of the budget worksheets, so we'll skip looking at the Calculations tab for this one. The last section we have to cover in the Data Entry page is for Typo 3 districts, elementary districts not within a high school district. Tuition amounts are entered here for adoption or revision as indicated, and the calculations are performed on the Calculations tab. Now that we've covered everything in the Data Entry tab, the final area on the Calculations tab pulls information collected from your budget amounts for the Department of Revenue. These cells will automatically pull from the appropriate places in your budget so that DOR can see this information all in one place. Thank you for listening to this brief video related to the budget forms. If you have any questions, please feel free to contact us at the information available on the slide.